We'll go to 12. David, stay with us. Brenna, stay with us. And that is Panuku's work program. Great work there. David, we've read the report. Anything you need to reiterate, please do so. Or Brenna.
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
And I've got the... I think this one was going to be moved by Councillor Denise.
I waited and waited.
Yeah, sorry. Clough. No, this was Councillor Clough. My apologies. This was to be moved by Councillor Clough.
Okay.
Happy to take your second, Councillor Walker.
Happy to second.
And David?
Probably, Mr. Chairman, only 2 points which are towards the end of the report, really just flagging, in the interest of transparency, a couple of issues coming up. One is around the issue that now Panuku's been formed. We will definitely be taking an active part in the LTP process, really engaging councillors around the fact that if we want more people to live in suburban town centres, a lot of them need investment in the public amenities so that they are more attractive areas to live in, because fundamentally we're repurposing them from what they're originally built for. And there's a lot of tired built form out there, so we need to look at how we combine a commercial development strategy with some investment into the quality of the living environment. The second issue we've flagged there, which I see as probably bringing to this committee, Mr. Chairman, next month, is for a debate around the use of the Public Works Act to help us in these regeneration initiatives in town centres where we need to be able to aggregate sites, because that's clearly a difference that we can make in terms of what the private sector will struggle to do. So we're planning a full paper and probably a workshop with you soon on that, but that's going to be an important issue going forward, not just for Panuku, but it's flagged in the government's recent paper on urban development authorities. Happy to take questions.
Have questions from members? Councillor Clough.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you, Panuku, Mike, and others for the work. And I'm going to ask 2 questions, but I would just like to recognise in public here thank the Avondale Jockey Club and the President, Alan Boyle, for the leadership he has shown in effectively reinvigorating the Avondale development. David, the funding options clearly in the Transform, where you are effectively the lead agency, and we've got the 2 projects, but in the Unlock category, you're merely a facilitator of projects. It would appear as it's kind of morphing a bit to also you being almost the lead initiator in some of the Unlock projects like Northcote and Avondale. So that's the first question. Is it kind of is there a blending with some of the smaller projects where you are effectively becoming the lead agency as well?
Yes, what we're finding is obviously the bulk of the council family is organised on a functional network basis, which is the logical way to, and the most efficient way to use resources. So it does mean that when we go into, places, we are finding that communities and local boards are looking for that leadership role to pull things together in that particular town centre location. And particularly when, the reason we have an Unlock is because there's more than one site that we're looking at. So if you think about Henderson, which will be coming in due course, Avondale, Northcote, which has been here, there are a number of sites. There's effectively often a whole town centre, and pretty quickly we find that we do need to do something around maybe some dated community facilities or some public amenity, as I mentioned before, if we're going to successfully start to change these town centres in a way that meets our aspiration in the unitary plan. Because fundamentally the strategy is based, as you all know, on the majority of new growth taking place in the existing form, urban form, and concentrating that as much as possible in and around town centres and transport modes. So we've got to start to be more realistic, I think, about some of the issues in there, and so part of what we'll be debating is indeed us taking more of that reinvestment role of development sites in areas like Avondale, Henderson, Northcote, than perhaps we all first envisaged when we got started a year ago.
And the second question is will, as part of that paper, you're coming back to this committee, or will it be another paper coming back to finance about effectively what this optimisation policy will start to do and impact on the $70 million return that Panuku has to make on land sales, because clearly that's a huge, significant issue for us going forward for the LDP, where we obviously are going to have to shuffle the chairs on the deck, so to speak, because you're coming back with a separate bit of work on that?
Yes, very much so, Mr Chairman, and that's a debate we have underway at the moment with the Council Finance team and the Mayoral Office. I mean, it goes to the heart of a lot of these things, which is the balancing between us trying to maximise financial returns versus you wanting us to reinvest in areas to achieve strategic objectives in our development that go beyond maximising the price on each site. So clearly there's always going to be a bit of that tension there, but we can't go on the basis that on the one hand we've got these very demanding sales targets, and on the other hand these growing aspirations around regeneration and redevelopment of town centres.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Just, we did have an indication that the local board would like to speak to this at the item, but I don't think they are here yet. Tracy or Susan? No? Okay, we'll proceed with the questions. Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, she'd gone.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Similar in lines to what my colleague next door to me asked, David. We've brief commentary when you come back around UDAs and the levels of risk to be associated with those, with this work, whether you've got the because everyone's wanting some Panuku jam on their old bread, don't they? Yes. And your jam's getting spread a lot thinner, and no one wants to pay for the jam and expect you to buy it for them. So there's a real challenge there. So what also is the private sector's ability and appetite are you finding for the work that you're undertaking?
Yeah.
So we're very clear that we are not an agency just carrying out public amenity projects, you know, like council departments do. So we're very clear that what we offer in these town centres is a package of a commercial, residential development strategy, which is then paired up with often some public good expenditure. And so we're trying to frame the debate internally around probably we need to look more at in these centres the ability to reinvest the proceeds of development sites in a centre into some of those goods. In terms more broadly of private sector interest in some of these locations, the truth is that it varies because we have a diverse range of centres we're trying to achieve things in. It is therefore there's differing levels of market interest in the type of sites and locations we have. There are also real challenges with any kind of apartment typology in the bulk of suburban Auckland. So we're having to make, if you like, trade-offs around getting some runs on the board and some progress versus achieving, you know, theoretical density requirements. So they're the kind of trade-offs, but I mean broadly there is a lot of private interest obviously, there's a lot of housing demand out there, so we're finding there's plenty to take heart and progress with, but it isn't easy in a lot of the centres.
Challenging.
Yes, and part of it is that ability to invest in a bit of public amenity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, it's 25 after midday, and I said we'd take lunch at 12:30, but I'd like to conclude this item, and I've got half a dozen questions or speaking turns to be taken. So just keep that in mind. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure, a couple of quick questions around unlocking, and that's a theme that you've got there. You mentioned the Public Works Act. Conceivably, could you look at the applicability of that to, say, unlocking areas like the Hammer-Headed Gulf Harbour that could be otherwise locked up? And the other issue around unlocking is unlocking funds. Are you working with other parts of council around developing a betterment tax, for example, that would help to unlock a significant amount of funding?
Yeah, so taking the first question, the key to brownfields redevelopment of quality is that you need reasonable sized sites. And one of the reasons the private sector struggles in lots of our centres is because the typical pattern of land ownership in our suburban centres, many of which were built years ago, is highly fragmented. And it's not unusual to see a block of, 5 or 10 shops with goodness knows how many owners and lessees and what have you. So if you look overseas, it is almost universal experience that you've got to aggregate, and as much as possible, as we all know, we try and do that through normal, just commercial dealing. But when you get to a situation where you've got maybe 8 units out of 9 or whatever, and it's the key to unlocking a significantly attractive redevelopment proposal, then that's when we need to start considering the compulsory provisions of the Public Works Act. We sometimes forget in this country that urban development and housing have been legitimate Public Works Act grounds for decades. They've been there a long, long time. This is not something new. It's been used in the past. And if we're serious about intensification, redevelopment at more scale and better quality in some of these centres, we have to go back and have that debate. In terms of your second question, councillor, the debate that we have definitely got underway with the council finance team is, given current legislative tools, is around a kind of development targeted rate, which sort of picks up a theme that I think the Mayor's promoted as well. Again, this is not uncommon overseas, and there are different ways it can be done. Obviously, the bigger the area you've got, the more viable it is. It's tricky in brownfields locations because you've got people that have been there for years, and at what point do they start to pay a development rate? So there, I've seen in Queensland, for example, effectively these development rates kick in when there's going to be a redevelopment of a site. That new rate kicks in. You can have it triggered by change of ownership of the property. There's all sorts of options, but we are definitely thinking about it, and it is definitely a way that we can help pay for the sort of public amenity upgrades I was talking about before.
Thank you. Councillor Hills.
Sorry, I had a comment, but we'll...
You can make a comment now. It's moved and
No,
seconded.
just a quick thank you to the staff. Honestly, the Northcote development staff working there just really trying to work with the community really well, and also Manukau, some of the same staff working down there on the same, it's very comprehensive, and there's a lot of exciting things happening, especially with the ability to get more intensified developments and upgrade our town centres. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
The one thing I would say is any way we can work on trying to get some first home buyer developments. I don't know how possible it is. I know with Hobsonville, some of my generation, some of my friends, the only way they're getting into housing is through some of those ballot systems in Hobsonville and things, and it's sort of a big celebration when that happens. So if there's any way to use public land for things like first home buyers, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Two quick but related questions. The first one going to unlock Hobsonville, and in particular the affordable housing component of 10% that's mentioned there with the contract with Evander. There are other developers there that are actually, if their press releases or anything to go by, are delivering a much higher component, 30% of affordable housing, which is more akin to some European developments, I think. There's a little bit of a lag there between 10 and 30, given what some of these other developers are getting out in Hobsonville.
I think if a piece of land has been sold at full price, probably 10% is a reasonably realistic number, and I know that's, to my knowledge, that's how the bulk of Hobsonville has the sort of formula they worked on, and it was, of course, what we put into our special housing areas approach, which is what the site was. Certainly more broadly as we go forward, we're happy to, we will be in thinking about bigger percentages, and we're actively working on a possible idea at the moment where we can push that number out a bit, but that does involve financial trade-offs in terms of the land value.
Okay, that would be great to see that work then. And the other one also to do with the civic
any affordable component to the apartments that are getting sold in the Civic?
I don't think so. I mean, there will be apartments in there that are planned to be at lower value, but...
660
yeah.
start at.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a very good example of the type of thing I was talking about before. Apartment typology, refit of an existing building that has a lot of challenges. The fact that we've placed, on the developer some significant obligations around the heritage preservation components. When you mix all those things in and then try and put selling the product out the other end cheaply as well, something doesn't compute. So we've never positioned that as an affordable development. There'll be a range of price points in it, and I don't know myself offhand what they are.
660 to 990. Okay, thanks.
That doesn't surprise me.
Councillor Mike Lee.
Thank you. Just to express general support and make the observation that these developments and indeed these plans need to be multiple agency, a team effort, in other words, and that underlines the importance of infrastructure. So water care and Auckland Transport, I do believe, have a key role. I guess these developments are somewhat like politics, being the art of the possible. In regard to Auckland Transport, they have a wealth of technical knowledge. Transport is so important for developing Auckland. But AT's plans can change. And often their role in these sorts of discussions, because it is technical, is decisive. In regard to developments which are publicly sensitive, I believe this technical advice needs to be weighed carefully, but shouldn't act as the ultimate veto. If technical advice doesn't suit the plans, that advice needs to be challenged, needs to be contested to arrive at the best possible outcome. Thank you.
Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. In regards to the report that's coming to the Planning Committee in May, will that give us an actual timeline in that for Henderson Unlock, or just the concepts? Because, I mean, I think people have been waiting and waiting for years and years and years, and it'd be nice to see, if possible, some sort of timeline, so we can have a bit of confidence that we're going to get something happening.
Yeah, we try and give a definite picture in the high-level project plans as much as possible of the first tranche of development activity, which is what we tried to do in the Onehunga one that's here today. So we will definitely be trying to do that as much as possible.
Thank you.
Yep.
Member Namani.
Just a brief question. I'm assuming that the second motion regarding the transfer of land assets, looking at it bluntly, I mean, I'm just assuming that that'll be done according to how it's statutorily supposed to be. So, for example, if Auckland Transport might have some Crown land in there, then there's another process that goes to rather than Pāmaku. So I'm just stating the obvious, but...
All this land is actually owned by Auckland Council.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like
Thanks.
a bond, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you, and thank you, David, again. Brenna, for your work here, and I think our B gives you a little bit of political support on asking Auckland Transport to expedite those transfers of land so that you can get on and regenerate as we expect you to do. So that all looks good. It's moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you, members. We will take a 30-minute break. We'll be back here at 1:05.